important conversation, especially in light of where our country is when you think of SGBV, when you think of survivors, when you think of all of that in the environment of a pandemic. And so really speaking about solutions is so important. And I'm really, also on a personal level, very, very honored to have this conversation because I am a survivor and I am very angry, and we've had conversations with Wango in this, although I'll try and control my anger during the conversation, about the lack of structures, sustainable structures for survivors in Kenya. So I love that this is a solution session. Unfortunately, we couldn't have certain arms of government here to really put them to task. And it's not from not trying to get them. I know Levi and his team did a really remarkable job trying to get a hold of people from Ministry of Health, trying to get a hold of our Nairobi Women's Rep, but that wasn't possible. However, I think whatever we'll talk about here, just the ideas that we have, we can amplify them online and in any other spaces that we go to try and like push for these solutions to see the day of light. So Levi has already done a really great intro for all the wonderful women who are joining me on the panel. And I think Bina is going to jump on stage while we're having this conversation. But I would love to start off with you, Wangu. And it's really great we're having this conversation now because Oxfam is responsible for bringing us together last year. And when I came to Wangu Kanja and seeing the innovation and the work that you were doing, especially during the pandemic, to try and make it easier for survivors to get access to various resources, I was really blown away and just really honored to have you here today and really grateful for the work that you and your team do. And your resource, it's really important for us to have you in this conversation, especially when we look at, there's been a rollout of the Tumaini clinics. We've seen a lot of noise being made about Mama Lucy Kibaki's hospital, 24-hour SGBV clinic. But I want us to dissect some of the quote-unquote solutions that government rolls out. And so the first stop is, because you do interact with quite a few survivors, is to know if when they visit government facilities for support, various kinds of support, is their feeling that the staff that they interact with have gone through any form of sensitization when it comes to handling survivors of SGBV? Is there a feeling of, once they leave, that there's a follow-up to find out how things are going from your experience on ground?
Thank you, Adele. And we are having a candid conversation. So one of the things we need to acknowledge is we have capacity gaps in terms of service provision, whichever way you want to look at it. Even when we were having the conversation around mental health, we still have gaps as a country. And case in point is when a 10-year-old is defiled and then they don't report, at the end of the day, they conceive. When they conceive, how is there either public facility or private facility that they might go to? How will they handle them? Do they have the capacity? My answer is no. And then also, what are some of the parameters or interventions they put in place to actually help the child to understand what is happening to her? Because then when you get to a point where I am a 10-year-old, I have conceived, my body is changing. Maybe nobody has ever talked to me about sex or sexuality or sexual violence. Then I get myself into a situation where I am 6 months pregnant. I don't know what's happening to my body. And eventually they will land in a either private or public facility. Our public facilities and also private institutions are not well equipped to handle such children. And then also, what is the immediate intervention? For example, giving them information. So what is happening to your body? What is going to happen? What do you expect to happen? If you're going to deliver a child, what are some of the things that are likely to happen to your body or during that period where you're giving birth? So those are some of the capacity gaps that we have, and we need to make sure that we don't lump up defiled girls with women who are coming to give birth because they wanted to give birth or they wanted to have a child. Those are two different conversations that we need to have. And at the end of the day, we need mental health integrated within those mechanisms to make sure that everyone who's coming into the system is well prepared, and we also are able to manage the expectations. Because, for example, when we have survivors coming to our offices, they know that we are going to sort out all their problems. So if you don't manage expectation from the onset, then you tend to disappoint them, and then they're frustrated, and when they go back home, they don't come back. So the truth of the matter is our systems are not well equipped to handle survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, and more so children. Yeah.
I think that's a really good beginning, because that's really what we're looking at on this panel, is like rebuilding and building those support systems that are sustainable and that are efficient. And I do know, obviously, there's people here today who, like yourself, are running maybe different forms of programs. And just on the point that you ended with, maybe we can just show with, you can put your hand up, if you feel like when these government solutions are being drafted, grassroots organizations and survivors are engaged in the creation process. Do you feel that happens? Yes? No? Okay. That's something that we're going to come to the research that backs these solutions and the support systems. But in your experience, have you felt like that there's that engagement with grassroots organizations who have built solutions while government is creating these structures? Have you felt that they engage you or that they engage survivors?
Looking at us working on sexual violence for the last 16 years until I think 2019, and that's when we fought for survivors to be at the table, to be engaged while government institutions or any other institution is developing interventions on behalf of survivors. For most of the time, what they say is, we invited survivors, but did they participate? Did you give them room to speak and say what they need to say? Because if you allow people to come into a room and then you don't give them an opportunity to talk, you are not engaging them. They're just participants like everyone else. So we need to make sure that survivors are at the heart of the conversation, to make sure that we have survivor-centered interventions, but also they're the best people to identify the gaps that are there. Because when I go to hospital, I get to be treated by the nurse at the triage, the doctor in the medical rooms, the counselor behind closed doors. I can give you feedback. But if you don't engage me, whether we are talking about Ministry of Health interventions, Ministry of Interior, Judiciary, if you have not engaged the person who is affected, then I don't know who you are developing the interventions for.
Yeah, and sometimes I even wonder if the interventions go through a validation process before they're rolled out. And, you engage with grassroots organizations, survivors, other key stakeholders, and say, hey, this is what we've created. What do you think? Where are the gaps? What do we need to add on? I really feel like that's such a huge missing gap. And then it makes you question the intentionality or even the goodwill of some of these solutions that, we keep being told about. But there's also something very interesting, because even for me, I had to call myself out when preparing for this, is research and ensuring that the solutions that are created are backed by research. And I wonder if we could jump into that at this point, right? In terms of what do you feel like is missing when you look at some of the solutions that we have for survivors right now? Do you feel like they're backed by research, or do you feel like there's a huge disconnect from where the numbers are taking us and the solutions and the structures that we're building to support survivors? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Adele. And just picking up from what Wangu has said, one of the things that we look at on matters sexual and gender-based violence, it's not targeted to one group. And there are multiple players within that space. So you'll find where we have failed currently is we have designed interventions that don't reflect all the survivors. And we also assume that all the survivors fit one, like it's just one size fits all. Even when you're looking at children, children are different. Yeah. Their developmental stages and milestones are completely different. So where I think we have failed, not just from a research perspective, even programming, is not tailoring the interventions to meet the audience that we are intending to reach. So I've done a lot of research around sexual and gender-based violence, and for me, I get excited when I see the research translating into a policy document. But the problem comes in that policy document does not shift to address the challenges the survivor spoke to during the research. So you have this particular credible document that speaks of the need for timely response, quality care, survivors should not pay for any service, but implementation? So I think there's a gap there in terms of translating this research into uptake to improve service delivery. Then secondly, even for the people who are doing research, most of the times we don't take time to ask ourselves who is the one that has the answer, the question that I seek to answer. Are you asking a question from research from the basis of your curiosity? Or are you asking that research question on the basis of there is this system that was put in place by government, is it functional or not? What do we need to do differently to ensure that the system is improved? So then we end up having research done, solutions developed that are not responsive to the communities we serve. And that's why for me, I keep getting frustrated. We started the post-rape care services in this country in 2004. How many years down the line? How many facilities have a GVRC? How many of these facilities have providers who have not just been trained, but providers who have been supported to be able to be a support to our clients? Because we did a study, and some of the things that the providers were telling us, in as much as they would really want to support the survivors, they themselves are drained. Drained because the system is frustrating. When they need to prescribe a medication, the pharmacy at the public hospital does not have that. So the survivor will then look at them and wonder, okay, you've given me a prescription, so where do you expect me to get this money from? Then they'll go to the community and tell people the importance of timely reporting. When this survivor comes to the facility, they find that facility only has one trained GBV person who's off duty that day. So you see, it's not just about doing the research. It's finding out, how do I ensure that the systems are also responsive to match the findings from the research? So it's a whole conversation in itself.
This is so, this is very interesting to me. And I wonder if there's, again, another question. Is there, before these support structures are built, is there engagement from a national government level with research before and during the rollout of these programs? Do you see that happening?
Currently, I can say we are in a different dispensation. There is some attempt from government,
Yeah.
But all through it's been, you'll find most of the research is driven by CSOs. And at times you also find as a country, we're in a space where we are depending on interventions that have been tested outside the country. So when we adapt them, we don't make an effort to contextualize them to Kenya. So you'll find there's an intervention that has worked in Rwanda, we carry it wholesome. and bring it to Kenya, forgetting we are in East Africa, yes, but Kenya and Rwanda are different. Then we have this common intervention called SASA that was tested in Uganda. So one of the things that I've seen CSOs here do, and that has also fed into some of the government policies, is looking at how can we take some of these pieces of that intervention and contextualize it to our communities. So it's getting to a point of establishing how do we make the government know that this policy is not responding. So they be on the table when we are developing that research question. Then also going back to the community to ask them, does that research question resonate with the situation on the ground? Only then will they as the community take up whatever findings you come up with.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I'm going to try not to get angry, because you'd think that a lot of this is, if you want to build efficient support systems, that this is common sense, right? That you would want to build something only once. So can we just do it right so that we don't have to keep coming back to it? But common sense is not that common. So I want to bring you in, Yvonne, and talk to you about the role of media. And before I ask you the question, perhaps we can get Bina a microphone. Do you have a microphone? Yeah, so perhaps we can be getting Bina a microphone. And it's always so strange to me to talk about media and to throw like, you guys are not doing this, especially now that I'm on like this side. Yet I was there for 10 years. A huge part of support systems for survivors is social. And a huge part of making sure that social support structure is strong lies on, what culture we normalize. And media really is like smack in the middle of all of that. And I'm just wondering what your view is when it comes to the role of media and public communication in helping us build a stronger support structure socially for survivors.
Media and social actors, I say we as media, we tend to play an agenda setting role. So we set the agenda for what is to be the topic of the day, or the debate of the day in the society or in the airwaves. However, this is where I'm going to plumage the media, there is, in terms of the way we report, there is a gap in terms of the interpretation. So the media's role is not to report that A did A, B, C, D, or A did A, B, C, D to B, but to interpret that. What does that mean for the common mwananchi? What does that mean for society? What does that mean for development? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean in terms of policies and the political arena? But what we find is that, especially now that we are in the digital age, is that the media sort of like picks, or rather, it's reporting from the social media vibe, for lack of a better word. So you find that they don't play their responsibility to full in terms of priming and framing the issues. And one of the things that I have issues with is the why factor. So you find rather a headline nuanced in this way. This man A, killed his wife because his wife did not make good githeri. Why is the why important? Why do we have to bring the why into the discussion? Why is it that this so-and-so killed person B and leave it at that? Because the why, what the why does is that it brings the onus to the victim to defend themselves of an act that was done to them, to their person. So you find, if you followed the story about the Nyahururu girl, I think it was Nyahururu, 18-year-old, who was killed by the British soldier. And what was the reporting? Prostitute. There are airwaves, there are media outlets that carry that she was a prostitute. So in the minds of people, how it is primed and framed is that because she was a prostitute, that's why she's killed. So we should not really care much about her, because at the end of the day, she was a prostitute. Let us look at the IV. I don't want to... the problem is patriarchy is ingrained. I don't want to mention her in this case, but I'll just put it so that we can actually have more meat to actually discuss this on. And the way that it was not necessarily reported, the narrative that was on social media, vis-a-vis the narrative that was on media, mainstream media. At some point, you could not make the distinction. Because what was the narrative? Kukula fair. These women wanapenda sana kukula fair. So if violence is meted upon their person, it's almost like it's validated. It is okay for you to actually have violence meted upon you. Nani alikombe ukule fair? Wanafaa wache hii tabia kukula fair. And it's so sad. It really breaks my heart when that narrative is carried to the media. Because what the media should be doing is actually reporting from a human rights lens. GBV is a violation of 23 fundamental human rights. But do we get to hear that? Do we get to read about that in the mainstream media? No. So the mainstream media needs to lift themselves, get themselves out of reportage of A did this to B, and get into more analysis and interpretations. Why is this important? Why should I care? Because if you keep telling me this person hacked this person shot this person killed their wife, at some point I normalize it. Because that is what we do in our brains when information is disturbing and when information is put out there in a way that it is not necessarily palatable or in a way that it's too much for me to be able to contain. So what are some of the discussions that media need to have? How can we be able to actually push it? And the other thing, Adele, just let me add briefly on this, is the aspect of follow-up. The media does little follow-up, unfortunately, sometimes. So in June, the president made a bold commitment of ending GBV by 2026. And there are 12 bold commitments. So will the media follow up to see if the government will actually articulate, not necessarily articulate, but implement some of these commitments that they have put on board? Who does that work if it's not the media? So in the way that we report, in the way that we prime issues, in the way that we frame issues, we sort of like validate the abuse, even when it is so subtle and nuanced. You say, why? She did this and this. Oh, she did this and this. Why? We need to stop asking the question of why. We need to stop telling why. It is enough that someone has been killed. We don't need to know what they were dressed. We do not need to know their profession. That is enough. And that, I think, is a way that media can be able to actually frame the social construct better. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. I think for me, one of the things that irks me is in the stories, in how they paint or sanitize perpetrators. So you'll read things like, he never drank, he never smoked, and he was a professor, and listing there is a story, because I ran a workshop once, there's a story where they listed this guy's degrees and PhDs, almost trying to say, what could have gone wrong? This is not the image of what a perpetrator looks like. You know what I mean? And there was no room for, first of all, that then creates the idea that a perpetrator looks a certain way. So I guess doesn't have a degree or smokes and drinks, and that's also harmful. But I don't think media has stepped into their power of helping us end SGBV. I don't think they have acknowledged the power, even in entertainment spaces, entertainment media. I don't think they've acknowledged the power that they have. And I wonder if you could speak to some of the fines, and we see this happening even currently in South Africa. They're having that conversation when we talk about new media and digital spaces. What are some of the things that can be put in place to kind of curb the normalization of violence against women and girls, violence against men and boys? What do you think? Because it's a tricky conversation, because also then it leans on to, are we controlling the media, and government can take advantage of that? I just wanted to know what your thoughts are around that.
Interesting question. I think one of the discussions that we were having over lunch is, we were actually sitting at a table of media women, and we were talking about patriarchy. And it's sad that patriarchy is societal. Every one of us, Adele, has patriarchy somehow ingrained in us. Have you ever thought of something, you think of, lakini mwanamke, hata kama unajua nakuanga na mdomo, and then you check yourself. So the thing is in checking yourself. And I think as media people, because our responsibility is higher, because our pool is higher, we are not just speaking amongst ourselves, but we are speaking to society. We are shaping narratives. We have a greater responsibility. On what needs to be done, I think the first thing is just telling our stories right. Telling our stories, as I said, from a human rights angle. And also following up some of the injustices that we see. It's funny, we wanted to start a Twitter space conversation when Kofi was coming back. You know, he was to come and present and sing or something.
I saw the post and I was wondering, hello? Hey guys, what is happening?
What an affront. During the 16 days of activism, we were up in arms. But it was sad. I felt so sad because I didn't see an article in the newspaper. I didn't see a broadcast item, either on radio or on TV, questioning why he's coming. Looking at the ramifications of that. Why are we having Kofi, while even now, I think it's in Belgium, he has a case of defiling a 15-year-old. Why? Why? Also, look, it's a very difficult, and we say we're not going to get mad here. We're not going to get all emotional. We're going to try. Because it's a very difficult conversation also to have. But I think one of the things that needs to be done as well in terms of trying to address the issue is also look to media training. So we have a lot of actors that do not really necessarily have a background on media and media ethics and all that. So why can't, just calling on industry players to have a trainings, even short trainings on how to get media to report responsibly, or rather. We've also heard of careless words being said by either media hosts, presenters, even in print and broadcasts. And it's really questionable because we are the ones to be more responsible, because we know how our words, we know how our pen can actually affect the society. But yet we see that in the way that we frame, in the way that we prime, we actually sometimes the biggest propagators. The other issue is that we are quite reactive in our reporting as opposed to being proactive. In 2018, we had, I think, at least 23 or 20 cases of femicides in Kenya within a 3-month span. At that time, every single headline of almost every single day had a story of femicide. But what happened when that died? What happened when there wasn't a spike, but there was a dip in the cases? The stories died. So what happens? Are we going to report on GBV only while we have cases of GBV? And there's a danger there, because there was a study that was done, I forget his name, I think it was David Phillips or something. He was looking at, I think from the University of Michigan. He was looking at suicide, the correspondence between reportage of suicide cases and the suicide cases spiking. And you find that every single time a suicide case was reported in the media, there was a spike in suicides. So sometimes my observation, well, clearly, let me just put a disclaimer out there, not research, I find that when we have a case of either femicide or gender-based violence in broad within the mainstream media or within any form of media, there is usually a spike. Why is it that somebody killed, shot, in another area, there was another person who shot or who strangled or who killed the kids or who burned, and you're like, why? So sometimes how we report, it sort of like triggers this many cases to actually take place. So the media needs to, and unfortunately also, there's that aspect of ownership. So one of the things we were asking, this is Chinyamaji, we were asking who.
She says into the microphone.
Can you imagine? Is who are the funders of the, for lack of a better word, of Kofi Annan coming to Kenya? And one of the scary bits was like, it could be one of the media houses. So how do you report against that if it's the media house that is actually funding this guy to come to Kenya? So I sometimes understand where reporters, media personalities, presenters feel like, you know, their hands are held because of media ownership. How can you go against your boss? How can you go against the organization that puts ugali and skuma on your table and still keep your job because you're reporting on a human rights issue?
Yeah, there are very many layers to these problems, but it's very interesting just hearing you speak. I didn't know about that study, and that even for me, just thinking is like, okay, we really need to be more intentional about how we write these stories and which stories we write, even the ones where there's a lack of justice or the ones where there is justice. We need to see more of those as well, you know? So thank you so much. And I want to bring in Bina, who is just such a wonderful woman, and hearing her life story is just amazing, especially when you think about women in the political space. Bina did run for MCA when she was 23. Yes, I got that right. And just hearing her story made me aware of the lack of support structures for women who are going into that space. We're here today talking about Women Raising Kenya, transformative leadership, but in political spaces, it's such a violent space. Bina was telling me, oh, I had to get goons. I was like, what? What do you mean goons? I'm like, oh, you mean like security? She's like, no, goons. And I just wanted to hear from your experience when you were in that space. And I know, unfortunately, there were very traumatic experiences related with running for that particular seat for you. Did you feel like there were actual support structures for you as a woman who was in a political space?
Thank you so much, Adele. Actually, part of the reason I don't think I'm going to run even in this coming election, I think it's the trauma that is associated with actually running for office. And I think that is even worse when it comes to you being a young woman. So I think the challenge, especially when you look at gender-based violence in political spaces, is the fact that gender-based violence in political spaces is considered as a cost of participating in the political space, such that if you experience it in the political space, you should have been aware that that is something you actually risk experiencing, because even when you go and report it, guys are even wondering, why are you reporting it? Like, that is normal, you know. And then the fact that that space as well does not even look at you as a woman and consider your experience, your unique experiences as a woman. People treat you as the way they treat a man. People treat you as a man. And even the police, you know, and even other bodies, right, that are responsible to ensure that we actually safeguard women's rights, and even just ensuring that electoral security is actually key when we have election. So I don't think things are improving. And if they are, it is at a very slow pace, because even when I look at the data that was collected in 2017 in regards to gender-based violence in election, not so much has been done to the perpetrators. And then number two, even within political parties, we have politicians who've come out and even reported their own personal experiences and cases, and even reported perpetrators. But then there's this thing about loyalty within a political party. Now, how are you reporting another person and you're within the same political party? So there's also the challenge with loyalty, right? So I think for me, even going forward, I'm looking at how do we strengthen the code of conduct within political parties. Because what even worries me about this coming election is the fact that in 2017, there was a report done by Kenya Human Rights Commission. I think it was released a few months ago, that looked at how rampant sexual and gender-based violence was in 2017, right? So for me, even when I hear us talk about the 2017 election was peaceful, I'm like, really? Women were raped and killed, but it was still peaceful just because the two principals or the two key presidential aspirants agreed? That is what makes it peaceful when kids were raped? So I worry. I really do, because I'm just like, what are the indicators for a peaceful election? So just because these two people didn't fight and there was a handshake, so it was a peaceful election, when people lost their mothers, when, people are still dealing with trauma, people were raped by policemen. Like, this is data that is out there, right? But we're doing nothing much about it. So I worry in terms of how prepared we are to actually curb gender-based violence in the upcoming election. We hosted a female aspirant in our last gender-based violence activity that we had. And for those who were there, and I think Blandina is not here because we're sharing the same platform, I remember her saying there are days that it's so heated on the ground because she risks being killed. She spends not less than $1 million on security because she needs 4 layers of security. Okay? 4 layers of security, right? And for me, thinking about what 1 million can do for even maternal health, what 1 million can do for a girl who cannot afford school fees, for what 1 million can do even for a CBO. But then someone has to spend this on security. And she even went ahead to say, the person I was running against in the last election has actually sent a message to me and said, you know what, that I should be more prepared because it's going to be worse in the next election. Okay? So this is information. This is even someone sending you a warning. It's like, if you think I was joking, I'm coming for this seat. Right? If you think I was joking. So by the time you're actually looking at 4 layers, because you're looking at the policemen, and then you're looking at the visible goons, and then now you're looking at the invisible goons, right? The one that you walk with. And then now you're looking at now the hecklers. You're looking now at the hecklers, the ones who are going to shout you down, because even the other camp has other people who are going to shout you down, right? So when looking at all those layers, and even for her, she's like, this is money that could have been put into good use, but I need to remain alive. So I don't think so much is being done. And these are people who are very well known in the political space. What does that say about someone who's just entering this space as a new person, right? Yeah.
And I think that speaks even to so we're missing out on a lot of transformative leadership from women, because even if you just think about the cost before you think about dealing with the violence, there are million shillings that goes to security. How do you start thinking? That's just security. You haven't done anything else around campaigning,
No posters,
No posters, nothing. And it's really sad. It's really sad. And Bean and I were talking earlier, and I was sharing my concerns about the next elections, how scared I am, first in not seeing any leader who's fitting the bill. So I'm wondering, where are we going? And then also it is linked to what you're talking about. And it's funny when we have these conversations, you can draw parallels between everything, because those stories are never covered in the media. They're never covered. And so we don't know that there's a lack of support structures for women who are in the political field or even want to get into the political field. So because Levi did tell me that people need to get home in good time, I'm going to say that we can open it up for any Q&A, because we've heard from political research, grassroots, media. Does anybody have a question that they want to pose to any of the panelists at this point? Speak your piece, or you'll hold it. Okay, so there's a question right there.
I have a question too, and I think I'll probably just direct this also to the media and to also Yvonne, and maybe even the other panelists. For me, right now, look at even what is happening today. It's a very huge political event. Even with the amazing work that Wangu Kanja is doing with saving survivors and all that, why aren't we asking the politicians, what are their commitments? I haven't even heard a politician speak about femicide. Like, women are dying every other day. We're talking about gender-based violence since COVID-19 that has spiked up. No political party is coming out to talk about their gender-based violence plan in terms of how we're reducing this. There's no one who's categorically coming out to speak against that. Is it because, young women are just collateral? as in for me, even when we're interviewing these people, because every other evening I am seeing very key political figures in our media, and I'm just like, is this just about the economy bottoms up? Because when I'm not confident, when I'm not okay, when I'm going through all these things because I'm a survivor, I cannot even contribute to the economy of the country. If you look at the costs associated with treating gender-based violence alone in this country, GEC did a study, and it stands at a minimum of 16,000 to treat, whether you're going to hospital, like all those rounds. So I think for me, why are we not holding political leaders accountable in terms of what are they doing to curb gender-based violence in this country?
Does anybody want to jump in and share their thoughts?
So just reflecting on what Bina has said, one of the conversations we were having this week is, why are we shifting the burden, the economic burden, to survivors of sexual violence, yet the government has the responsibility? Sexual violence is a national security issue, and there is no other way to look at it. It's a crime. And the reason why we are saying that is it's a crime, we have the Sexual Offences Act that is articulating all those different forms of sexual violence, and it has minimum sentences to each and every single sexual offense act that has been mentioned in the Sexual Offences Act. And alluding to what Bina has said, 16,000 shillings, if you total it up, they actually cumulatively, survivors spend 46 billion shillings annually. That's money that can run 3 counties in a whole year. Government has not taken that burden. We have shelters that are actually accommodating children, girls, who have gone through defilement. So that person who's running, and it's a private shelter, so that person has to take in the burden of, I will welcome you to my shelter, so I will shelter you, I will feed you, I will clothe you, and then at the end of the day, if we have any medical attention that you require, I will actually look for ways and means to make sure that you receive that care and support. But on top of that, if I am pregnant, then the cost is actually going to be, you're going now to be feeding 2 people. So looking at how, and this is the $1 million question that I keep on asking people. Do we want to get to a point where Kenya is no longer in existence? And the reason why I'm saying that is when we have people who are not healthy mentally, what happens is crime goes up, people are not working, the economy goes down, people cannot find for their families, then it translates to people start dying. So do we want to get to a point where there is no longer Kenya, and that's when we are going to act as Kenyans? And going back to what Yvonne had said before, the issue of how we report, and this is one of the things that I keep on asking parents and also institutions that are running mentorship programs. When we are saying it is okay for someone to be rejected, can we help people to understand that rejection is an okay thing? If boys ask a girl out and then they're rejected and then they become violent, there's something wrong with that. And there's something wrong with our society because we are not questioning those behaviors. It is okay to be rejected as a person. How you react after the rejection matters. Going back to Kula Fair. Why are you sending me fare? Have you articulated? It comes with terms and conditions. What are the terms and conditions? Are you giving me 1,000 shillings so that I can have a one-night stand with you? Can you articulate that and say, I'm sending you 500 shillings, kuja kwangu, we are going to go for dinner, and at the end of the day, I will actually have sex with you? Because then a person will make an informed choice by saying, then I'll come over. Because it both happens to men and women. Both men and women are sending money to other men and women. Why are we focusing on women only? So at the end of the day, every single person has a responsibility to play in ending sexual and gender-based violence in Kenya. And it's a high time that we take it seriously. Because when I see a 3 days baby being raped by their biological father, I'm not saying a total stranger broke into their house, no. The person who's supposed to be protecting this child is the one who's violating them. Mtoto wa siku tatu. I'm not saying 1, 2, 3. I cry, I feel sad, I feel frustrated, because at the end of the day, we are not seeing what is brewing day by day. It will come to a day where we will not be walking freely in the streets of Nairobi, whether you are man, woman, or child.
I think, Adele, just to add to that, what they raise is very critical. But as I sit here, not to be a devil's advocate, I'm looking at when it comes to matters GBV, really there is no one player that can take the blame.
Yeah, it's a combination.
It's a combination. So we have spaces where she talked about the commitments the government made. So part of the commitments, you're looking at ensuring the laws are implemented, ensuring that there is a survivors fund, ensuring that during this electioneering and COVID period, that there are resources there to ensure people get services. And also having our systems in terms of service delivery strengthened. However, you'll find that we are dealing with a community that continues to hush matters GBV because of the stigma that the previous panel had talked about. Then secondly, we are the same people who, when we have someone coming forth to speak, we point the finger. So at the end of the day, the survivor gets hit from all corners. So what then happens? And it's not an issue that when you come out to speak, it doesn't end there. It's a label that follows you all through. So if you're not helped as an individual, you then draw back. And then you become one of those perpetrators we are talking about here. Because by that violation happening, it means your power was snatched. And we're human beings. You would want to reclaim that power. So if you're not helped, then you will become violent and help another, affect another victim so that then you claim what you lost at that point in time. So I think for me, the point I'm raising is we are all called upon to be accountable. To be accountable to create spaces that are safe for everyone, be it in my house, be it in my workplace, be it in the market space, be it in the political arena that she's just talked about. We all have a role to play.
Exactly. I completely agree with you on that. I want to make sure that we give a chance to the lady who had a question. Oh, the mic was taken away from you, sorry. And then maybe you could speak to Bina's question when we're wrapping up as well.
Okay, it wasn't a question, but it was a comment that issues to do with GBV, it's actually diverse. That we are talking about sexual GBV issues, but there's also the political issues, and there's also the policy issues. That currently we have the Nairobi GBV Management Act. How many of us participated when that policy was being formulated? That we're actually out from the policy making processes, and I think I take the blame because I only point the fingers. But now when you hear the cases is when you come back home and ask myself, what have I done? I champion for gender responsive budgets, but I've never gone to the extent to ensure that the budget is also GBV friendly. And by it being GBV friendly, I'll actually advocate for increased allocation to the health centers or the health facilities by having a nurse who will be responsible in handling the GBV victims. I'll also ensure that at the hospital, We have the P3, honestly. You cannot go there, then the first thing you're being told by the policeman is that where you are clothed, where's the evidence? And you're already, as in, there's nothing bad like a woman who's gone through that process. So I think for us as actors, because if I can share an example of Wasiaya. Wasiaya, I don't know if you've joined any network that champions on GBV issues, which I think you should join. Wasiaya never jokes with rape cases in Korogosho. She goes to court. She will take you to court, and she's jailed a majority of men there. So we need champions like her, not just to work alone, but have someone to hold her hand, so that even her security, that even as much as you're talking about GBV, we need to have a buffer zone, that it is not just Wasiaya working on GBV in Korogosho, but we have Wasiayas, many of them. So my key takeaway is that even the policy that is already in place, that it is on management, maybe it's a plan for 2022, we can have this workshop again and look through that policy act and see the areas that we can actually influence. Because if we don't engage when those budgets are actually being formulated, then that policy will never be implemented. It will just be those nice policies that Nairobi has, very good policy, but vitu kwa ground, it will never happen until we actors will come and occupy those spaces.
That's very, very profound of you to share. And so if somebody has a question or they want to say, hey, I want to commit to something, that would be a beautiful way, even with this being the final panel.
Yes, thank you. My name is Diana Mushe. I just want to reiterate on what the point she's brought about public participation in these budget making processes. How do we involve more women? How do we bring them on board to be part of the budget making process?
Sorry, Levi.
Sorry, I don't know if you're collecting all the questions first or...
I'm actually having people respond immediately, but is there another question after? So you have a question, okay. So we could actually do that. We could get all the questions first.
So mine, don't worry, I'm a very political person. And my question is, Bina has said, and I'm sorry that you sound like discouraging so many young people to get into the political space. I'm one of those young people who I think maybe something will change if I get to that political space. Because all my life, I've seen giving people the responsibility to represent someone like me, but still, it's very unfortunate, like what Adele said. Uko juu, of course, unwhose hand are we safe? Because there is none. Okay, there is, but unfortunately, we know what is happening. We know the best people that we have up there who are running for presidency. Unfortunately, it's very hard for them to be able to get to that. But there's so many young people who don't have resources, who don't have all those very things that political players need. But in 2017, we were still giving examples with Darakanith, the young person who was elected without having all those things. But now we get to 2022, and we want to, all the things that we're celebrating in 2017, that there are young people, the independent candidates, who are elected without having all those political muscles and big political parties and all those resources. But now we seem like discouraging those who really want to run. How do you feel? Because at the end of it, whether we like it or not, political plays a role in even the issues of STV. Because if you don't have good legislators, we'll continue saying, there are no people who are pushing for this. We'll continue complaining. And it's very unfortunate that you talk to young people, and I engage with young people every day, and they have lost hope. They have completely. Even IBC said, they said it's not their fault, and I agree with the IBC. It's the political in Kenya, the politics in Kenya has made young people who should go to register as voters. I once said that if all of them, 9 million, were able to register, the new voters, they will have elected their own president. No, they will, yeah. So if it's possible to, for me, I say we don't have to discourage. Let's continue encouraging young people to get into the political space. And of course, share and tell them that it's possible to be able to, because if we don't do that, then we'll continue complaining the same cycle for the next 50 years until I'm no more, and my kids will come start complaining about the same, and things won't change, because then we'll continue talking about the same issues around SGBV, the same issues about our politics. So it's very important we continue encouraging young people, and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So just try and keep your questions very brief, and if you have a particular panelist who you want to speak or to answer your question, that would be great. Levi, do you have a question? Levi has a question.
I do. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that everyone else has a chance, though. Is there anyone else who wants to speak?
Oh,
okay, then maybe she can.
Two. So,
habari ya jioni.
Mzuri.
Mimi ni Jane kutoka Kawangware. Nataka niongee na Kiswahili kwa sababu that's the language you use.
Ni sawa.
Tukiwa kule mashinani.
Kabisa.
Ukiongea Kizungu, nobody will bother to look at you.
Yeah.
So, nataka niulize my sister there. Kwa sababu kuna kitu ilifanyika kwa ploti yetu. Mama alikuwa achomewe ndani ya nyumba na mzee pamoja na watoto. Aliokota nguo za mama zote na akamwagilia mafuta ya taa. Ready to burn the whole family in that room. Huko si nyumba, ni rooms, tunakuanga na rooms. So, huyu mama alijaribu kureso the husband with the help of the younger sister, wakamweka chini na akajaribu kutoka kwa mlango na akawezewa, akafungua mlango, akakimbia mpaka kwa nyumba ya mkubwa mmoja wa nyumba 10 ambayo ni Jane mimi. Kukuja akanielezea hiyo story. Nikapigia chifu wangu simu. Nikamwambia what happened. Chief akaniambia ningoje kidogo. Akapigia OCS. OCS naye akaelezewa mahali Jane hako. Naye akanipigia simu akaniambia anatuma polisi wakuje washike yule jamaa. Akatuma mahindra na jamaa wawili. Hao boys ni blue. Wako in blue, bado wako in blue. Ile ndaki blue. Kukuja walikuja mpaka kwa gate kwa sababu walijua mahali huyo mtu wako, lakini hawakuwa wanajua mimi kama niko kwa the same plot. So wakati ule walikuja wakashika huyo jamaa, wakamuingiza kwa gari. Within 2 minutes tunamuona ndani ya plot tena. Yani saa hiyo sasa ni collar up. Kichwa ikiwa juu. Mtanifanyia nini? Hata ninyi wanaume wenye mko hapa. Kumbe ashapeana pesa na watu wameenda. Sasa in such a case, mimi ni CHV. Najaribu vile nitaweza kusaidia yule mama ako pale chini. Nitafanya aje? Nitasikia aje kama mimi mwenyewe hata silipwi? Mnajua CHV walipwi. Na bado wana drug hiyo maneno kwa sababu CHV waonekani kama ni watu wanafanya kazi on ground. Natumia airtime yangu kwa sababu I have a passion for my community. Sasa mambo kama hiyo ikifika hapo, tutasaidika namna gani kama sisi CHVs?
Thank you so much for your question and for the work that you do as well. So Bena, anybody can feel, if any of the questions speak to you, you can just share your answer. But I think we have 2 more questions and 3 more actually. So we'll hear your question at the back and then we'll come to the front.
Yes, habari ya jioni.
Mzuri.
Mimi niko na swali kwa wangu Kanja. Natoka Gorogocho, naitwa Wasiaya. Mmesema mnadili na mambo ya defilement. In Gorogocho tuko na post within Gorogocho. ukishika perpetrator mpeleke huko, within 2 days amerudi. Ukienda kuuliza, unapata polisi anakuambia hapa kukuwa na kesi, unaona, but mkenye imefanyika hadi mko na evidence. Saa swali yangu inakuja hivi, mnaweza mkatusaidiaje? Juu unapata mzazi ana feel hurted, mtoto wake amedhulumiwa, but hana haki kulingana venye ako na umasikini. Mimi ni gender defender, tena mimi udefend sana, hadi mimi utaka mtoto apate haki yake. Lakini nafika time nasema, saa who am I in the community? Kama polisi ndiye ashaacha perpetrator, si next week utakuja kuchinjwa. Juu kama sasa tuko kwa December, unaona, unaweza stukia umekuja kuvamiwa, nani atakusaidia? Saa mimi kama mimi tuko na hiyo challenges Korogocho. Tuko na community nyingine inaitwa Gomongo. Hata ukipata tu mbaba na defile mtoto hivi, hakuna mahali utaenda kustaki. Ukienda hiyo post na cases za Gomongo tumezoea. Unaona? Saa cases kama hizo, kama wangu Kanja, mimi naomba mtusaidie. Watoto wapate haki yao, wamama wale pia wanadhulumiwa wapate haki. Juu mimi kama mimi nimejua niko na haki. Na haki yangu mtu hawezi akandhulumu. But sasa kuna wale familia bado wanadhulumiwa. Saa wangu Kanja, mimi nataka usaidizi. Ni hiyo tu.
Thank you so much. Did we have one? Oh yeah, there you are. And then we'll come to Levi, and then we'll give our panelists a chance to answer.
Mine was just a comment. I've been listening to a lot of the issues, and I would say it also stems back to how are we as citizens involved in these processes that happen around us? You know, when you speak of governance, when you're speaking of, do we know our constitution? You know, the first article speaks on all sovereign power belongs to the people, meaning ni sisi, we actually have the power, but do we participate in these processes? We want to influence the budgets, we want to do all this, but are we participating in these processes in the sense that ushawai and like public participation hearings a budget, you know? Do we organize? And so a lot of the time we are trying to, I work for Siasa Place, my name is Miriam, and we are trying to engage with young guys, you know, to remove this voter apathy that we have right now and get people to actually be involved in these decisions, because that 50 bob unachukua hapo mtaa, it's your money you're taking in that they're taking away from you, you know, and then it will cost you later. It will cost you if you go to the hospital, hautapata services at GBV. So I think it's looking at it in a systemic point, like, do we know the roles of our leaders, you know? Do we just all the time, we're like, you do this, you do that, but do we really know that? And just how can we get more involved in those processes? Sisi kama wananchi, sisi, like, do you know your MCA hapo kwa ground in your area? Do you know where your health facilities are? So that you go and you know, okay, this budget line is over here. So I think it's a lot of the role, part of it is also us being involved in these processes. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called active citizenship, and everybody needs to aspire to like switch that on internally so that you know exactly who to hold accountable and for what. So last question, last but not least, Levi.
Sure. This is maybe controversial, so not sorry. You know, Nelmo brought up a very good point that no matter what we think about the government is there, and we need to engage with the government and policy in order to change things, you know? At the same time, we know that government also is one of the slowest sort of organizations in terms of dealing with some of these issues. I mean, you can talk and talk and talk for years. So I don't know if you remember the DJ Shafi sort of controversy. So it really annoys me, honestly, because as people who don't co-sign that crap, the crap that the people that like that say, can we use the private sector? Can we use the companies that these people work for to leverage some action against them instead of waiting for government to, figure out a law that they're breaking or like a policy, because we know where these people work. And I mean, I think everyone has been bringing up that, there's what we need to do as government, as whatever, as individuals, as communities, but we seem to avoid the private sector. We use it, we talk about companies building shelters, doing things like that, but can also they be the purveyors of justice for some of these things? Because, I mean, it's easier for brands that are public, because then you can protest, you can, say, how dare you, why would we buy from you when we know that you support GBV? But even for brands that are not public, we know that this stuff happens in all levels of business, So I don't know, I guess, an open question if anyone thinks that the private sector is a good avenue as well to get justice for some of these things.
Am I allowed to answer? I'm an American moderator hat, but I feel so strongly about it. Because obviously that was my previous co-host, I believe. And I think that experience, it just speaks to two things. How irresponsible media is with the power that it has, one. And then the second thing is what the women in media spaces have to go through. Because if that's what's said publicly, then what is not making it to your ears, And I really actually do think that the people have the power. And now that we have the digital space, that's a tool for us to exercise our power collectively and stronger. And people might not care about women, but then we understood in that moment that they care about money. They care about their bottom line. So it's to ask these companies that as women, we account for a lot of their target, the people who they target. When they get their profits, a lot of us contribute to that. So it's to say, even if it's 100 shillings, you're not getting my 100 shillings because you supported A, B, C, D. And it goes back to even just being an active citizen. It goes back to how comes people would go to a Kofi Olomide event? What happens if nobody turned up? What message would that send? What happens to, like, even the musicians or the personalities who we know are pushing forth rape culture, etc., etc.? Are we clapping? Are we moving on? Are we just saying, hey, whatever, that was a phase, now we're done? We also hold the power, and we can use that power to ask private sector to do better. And I think that was a key indicator. That was such a pivotal moment because women in this country organized well. There were women drafting up legal documents to send to CAK. There were women calling out your EABLs, your Safaricoms, advertisers, and saying, hey, you're advertising here, why? And literally in a matter of hours, things happened. These were not women who were known. These were women with access to a digital account or whatever on whatever social media platform. And so I do believe we can hold private sector accountable, not only in a reactionary format, but even like beforehand. So who do we engage with in business? If we're in those rooms, is to ask, you want to do business with me, but last week I saw you guys were sponsoring, I'm not going to do business with you. That's what it's going to ask of us for us to see any sort of change. And I love that you bring that up because private sector is part of the problem, because if that push was not done by those women, it would have ended with the statements. That's it. And then we'd have the situation again, But because active citizens were active and demanded more from private sector, I think that's something we need to do more of, because they have a responsibility as well, not just in terms of charity, but in where do they put their money and what values do they stand for. Yeah. I'm sorry, I took off my moderator hat. I'm putting it back on. I'm done.
That is actually very well put, Adele. Very well put. One of the things as I'm reflecting on this as well, so Moina, I think I'm pronouncing her name well.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually at the helm of drafting, I think, I don't know if the sacking letters, I'm not sure. So you actually see that in terms, we really need women in leadership because it makes a difference. One of the issues that we actually even face in the media space is because the representation, the gender representation in media is also skewed towards the men. So you go and you say, I want to put this story up, you're like, watu wanataka kusikia kuhusu Raila na Ruto. And you know, that's how media, today I'm bashing media, and that's how media actually defends itself, that this is what the people want to consume. People don't want to consume meti stories, they want to hear, this is Ruto versus Raila agenda, and they splash it. Because you realize now, even as we geared towards the elections next year, there's a lot of that in the newspaper. You pick a newspaper, that is just the news. And sometimes it can get quite crass because it's top headline after top headline after top headline. It's tiresome. Just to respond to what you're saying, sorry, your name again? Nelson. Nelmo. Sorry, Nelmo. I think for me, I don't know, Bina will correct me if I'm wrong. She was putting forth her personal experience. I don't think she was really saying that young people should not get into the space. It is important for young people to get into the space. But we need to realize that it is also skewed against women, especially young women. So the issue of patronage, because political parties have a lot of patronage. For you to get, as a young person, to get into a political party in Kenya, like the top notch, top 5 for what, we have 100 plus, I think, if I'm not wrong, political parties. But there are some that, you know, just good on paper. But for you to get to the ones that, in quotes, matter, it takes a lot. So for young women, because also you do not have the financial muscle, how do you pay for it? There's a lot of sexual harassment. I'm glad that Miriam is in the house. One of the things that Siasa Place, we have done as Siasa Place, is to ensure what the colleague at the back was talking about, participation, is to ensure that young people participate in the political process, whether it's the budget-making process, just to be able to participate in some of these processes. And one of the things that you find is that access to information in Kenya is really problematic. Information is quite hidden. And I think it's deliberate. How comes people, we don't know when these things happen? Sometimes even I do not know. So what does that say to the person who is actually at the grassroots level? If someone else does not hold their hand and say, hey, kuna budget inatengenezwa hii place, ebu kuja tuangalie hii budget. Come, we give our voice. If they are not organized and mobilized, and someone needs to do that job, because when we talk about citizen participation, clearly, Mazi, hatuwezi acha historia, citizen mobilization and organization off the table. It has to be part of the discussion. Just to answer her question, Bina's question, again, goes back to media ownership. Just look at who owns top media in Kenya. You will be able to get that question answered. There's a time one of the media houses gave Martha Karua a blackout, like a total media blackout, because of something that she said, calling out media blackout. How many times have the 3 political, how do I call them? Patronages made comments against media, but nothing has been done. There's never been given a total blackout. So that also comes into force. And then very quickly, there's something that we haven't really tackled, the issue also of the LGBTQ. Have you ever seen, and you know, even there in those spaces, there is a lot of gender-based violence, but have you ever seen a story item in the media about LGBTQ, GBV amongst themselves? Very little, very minimal, if at all. Especially now, talking about access to health services. I had a conversation with Festus from Q, and one of the things that say, mtu anaenda hospitali, Anasa naitana, Njoni mwone shoga ameshikwa na kaswende. They come and see. They all come, nurses staring at you like this, coming to see. So what does that say about even access to healthcare services? We're talking about prevention, but we're trying to prevent this person from actually getting, it's an STD, but from getting more worse, from getting an HIV infection and all that. So if we do not even bring all the actors into the table, as I think Carol was saying, then we have a problem. When it comes to participation, everyone has a responsibility, but let us not hide under that cocoon and say, if it's everyone's responsibility, clearly it's no one's responsibility. Everyone has an individual responsibility to play. Media has a responsibility to play, government, civil society, and the citizens themselves. If no one as a citizen has come to organize you, why don't you organize in your own locality and actually get to doing something, get to participating in these processes, or get to participating in terms of calling out these issues. To just quickly what they were saying about reporting and then it comes back, try collaborating with the media. I know, for instance, one of the programs, what we did is, this guy came out, it's in, what is this place? Shauri Moyo. And say, papa de kuna mse, by the ame rape, ameshikwa, kidogo tunamwona mtaani, tusaidieni tufanyaje. Call the media guys, hey, there's this and this happening. You blast it out in the media. So sometimes we complain, oh, media is not doing this, media is not doing that. But are you taking the stories to the media? Are you being proactive about it as well? So it's a collective responsibility, but each of us has to play their part.
Okay, so in terms of public participation, the first or second question, I think Siasa Place is a good place to kind of like land in there and try and understand some of the issues. I'll say for myself as well, some things are very hard to understand, but they do a good job of breaking it down and keeping you informed. And then it's up to us to share it amongst our peers as well, right? So I want to give a chance to Wangu Kanja to respond to the question about how you can help her do her work better. And then we can come to Bina. I think it's important for you to speak towards Nelmo, what Nelmo said, but also the story that was given right here. So we'll start with you, Wangu Kanja, first, and then we'll get to Bina.
Okay, so one of the things that Wangu Kanja Foundation is trying to do as part of the police reform working group is actually addressing corruption when it comes to issues of sexual and gender-based violence. Okay, the truth of the matter is, if there is no demand from the ground, there is nothing much that can be done. Even if we lobby and we lobby and we lobby, if there is no demand for services, and it's a conversation that we are having with National Police Service, Ministry of Interior, and I've asked over and over again, I can take up a case, and if you give me evidence, we will submit that evidence. But if I don't have information, I can go and make allegations, but they will come back and ask, nipatie evidence. And then also going back to, if you see a case is just troubling you over and over again, please call the media and eliminate yourself from that conversation. Because then if you're part of them documenting, then you're putting yourself in the line of fire. One of the things that I will promise to do is I'll give you my contacts, alafu mkuje kwa ofisi yetu, ama a point of mali mko comfortable. We can meet, we can have a conversation, I can get all the details, and then I can present the case to IG or the Directorate of Reforms under National Police Service. And the reason why I'm saying that is currently they are actually working towards election preparedness. And this is, for the first time, this is happening, where National Police Service and Ministry of Interior are taking lead to ensure that whatever issues that are experienced by citizens or voters during elections are actually addressed. And one of those things is issues of sexual and gender-based violence. So what I can do is just take the information and then submit it to National Police Service. And one of the other things that you can actually do, we have the Survivors of Sexual Violence in Kenya network has a membership of survivors of sexual violence, because one of the things that we said is nothing for us without us, because you end up making decisions on our behalf and we don't see that translating into either service delivery or even compensation, especially around post-election violence. And looking at if we are to address some of the sustainable development goals, we need to address some of the issues survivors of sexual violence, men, women, and children are going through. Because if you are taking away money from me, you're making me poor. Then you're not working towards addressing the sustainable development goal. Number one, no poverty. So even when we are reporting as a country, what are we reporting? And one of the things that I think, and this is where now media houses come in, is can we help development partners and donors to influence them? That if you're building the capacity of government, you need to build a community structure, the capacity of a community structure that can hold that government accountable. So we keep on pumping money to government institutions, but we are not creating community structures that are going to hold the same government accountable. So we don't have the capacity to do that. But one of the things that we are doing, especially with a focus on sexual violence, we are building the capacity of individuals who are gender defenders, human rights defenders, community health volunteers, who are survivors of sexual violence with capacity and knowledge to champion but also question accountability mechanisms. And one of the things that we need to start with right now is Kenya committed 25 or 23 million USD towards addressing sexual and gender-based violence, but we have not questions. Is it towards prevention, response, or protection? And if it's response, what does that response look like? If it's prevention, what does it look like? Iyo pesa iko wapi? Mi nasikia Kenya committed, but I don't know. I cannot see the money. Iko na treasury, iko treasury, iko Ministry of Health, iko Ministry of Interior. Where is the money? Because we need to ask the difficult questions. And then when we call for people to come and join us and ask those hard questions, please don't let us down, because most of the time, mujipata pale peke yangu na baki. So where are the rest? I am not the only survivor of sexual violence in Kenya. We are many, and we are men, women, and children. And one of the things that we're actually factoring in, under the Survivors of Sexual Violence in Kenya network, we have men and women, because men are not exempted. They are survivors too. And most people ask, how now? But men are raped by their fellow men. The percentage of men raped by women is very, very, very small. But the majority of men who are raped are actually raped by their fellow men. So when we are having a conversation, and this is the thing, I don't think God created sex to be a bad thing. We are making it a bad thing. He only created for two things: pleasure, procreation. So why are we adding a third thing when he did not include a third thing into it? So let's have candid conversations around issues of sex, sexuality, and sexual violence. And we are taking issues of police corruption seriously, because we've had too many cases. The only thing is, nobody has ever brought evidence and said, this is the evidence I have, and I can clearly see from beginning to end that it is not questionable. The minute it introduces doubt, then people will be like, ah. But also, this is the other thing that you need to know. Under the Constitution of Kenya, the offenders, perpetrators of any crime, they also have a right. So they can go to court and then they will ask for bail or bond. So we also need to interrogate whether that person was released through one of those mechanisms or not. But this is one of the things that I need to emphasize. Sexual and gender-based violence cannot be addressed by one mechanism, and it needs consolidated efforts where we are speaking to each other. Ministry of Health is speaking to judiciary. Judiciary is speaking to national police. So they don't need to have parallel structures trying to address sexual and gender-based violence, because at the end of the day, we will not go anywhere.
Thank you so much. And I think it's great that our panelists are even like putting their last call to actions in their answers just because of time. And I do actually want you to be able to exchange numbers so that happens. And anybody who needs Wangu Kanja as a resource for the work that you do, I think, do take advantage of this moment. Bina, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to Nelmo and also towards the police corruption case, and then we'll give you a chance to give your closing remarks as well. So Bina, if you could put your call to action as well in your answer, that would be great.
So first of all, your story really touched me, because you know what you said about Kenya umesema kuhusu huyo msee kutoka kuchoma watoi wake. 1 month ago, I lost my cousins, 3 babies in Kayole. They were burned to death like a month ago. So it's hard to internalize your story. It's really hard to internalize your story. And so to think someone is about to like do that intentionally to kids because of a disagreement, right? But I'm really sorry. It just really took me back to that. But just reflecting about Kenya unasema, and in terms of
Bina, we can give. Do you want a moment? We can give you a moment and some water.
I think I can step in while she just composes herself. I think for me, picking up from them, my reflection comes in, there are 2 levels of engagement. You find that most of the things you're doing in Nairobi is not what is happening on the ground. So here, in the sense that when you're talking about these 2 ladies here, they speak to the CHVs across the country who are doing a great work but neglected by the system. And secondly, for me, when I hear any mention of a champion, I worry. Why? Because they put themselves at risk, but we don't safeguard them. So when this lady goes out there, looking for cases, collecting the evidence, when she comes back, you will be in your office, she will be attacked. And then that kills her morale to help any other survivor. Or she becomes a bitter CHV. Bitter because the system has failed. So even as we are building capacity of the CSOs, how do we also empower our grassroots players? Because when they are strong, then the system works. If they are not, they become robots. And it's not just the CHVs, even in the health facilities. You recently heard of this provider in Kisumu who was recorded violating a house help. And people bashed this provider. But for me, my question was, who has taken time to find out the baggage that this provider goes home with every day? Of this case that came with evidence, but the police frustrated. Or the evidence was provided, but the family settled at home. And you expect her to be 100% when attending to the next survivor? Really doesn't work. So we need also to help the individuals who are part of the system. Because when they are healthy, then everything goes on. So just to give up my, call to action. For me, I look at it in terms of we need not only to hold the government accountable, but also give the community the right information. I have seen at times we use the community as flower girls in our meetings. So they come for the public participation, but we are speaking too much English, as she said. So they don't understand what this figure means and how they can then question when the MCA or the MP does not translate it to action. So how do we use a language that is also reasonable and understandable to the people we are trying to reach to? Because once we empower them, then they will call the government to action.
Yeah, that's such a powerful call to action, and language is something that comes up a lot. Bina, are you feeling?
Yeah. So I wanted to say that we work with Chama women in the community, and some of these cases come up in terms of they go and report something, and the same thing happens. And even when we talk about calling the media, imagine, Mwende, and maybe this is feedback, you can imagine for the media to even come to your event like this, they want money. Imagine coming to the community. Because at times, even when we shift the burden to the community, like calling them to an event like this, they want money. A very important conversation like this, they want money. Now imagine coming to the community, you know. So at the end of the day, even as we talk about how do we also build those relationships with media personalities who are able to take up these cases, because even when we've tried to spotlight some of the cases in the community, that's the same challenge we face. And I think also building firm relationships with different people in the local authority. And I'm saying that because during the COVID-19 pandemic, you remember when the president had said we shut down all the bars, right? So the president has said that what happened at the community, watu wakaanza kufungua mabaa kwa ploti ndani. Mtu anafungua baa kwa ploti ndani. Unaona mna nod, I think hata mnajua kwa community yenu. Mtu anafungua baa kwa ploti ndani, hakunanga maji, mtaa maji na kuja once, mlevi ajui kutumia bathroom, ajui kutumia choo. Women came to the meeting wakaanza kucomplain. Mtoto wangu msichana akienda kwa choo anapatana na mlevi anamharass. Imagine, okay? Tuka map out. So the women, the Chama women leaders we work with, waka map out all the bars zimefungiliwa kwa ploti ndani, because unajua ukipita unadhani ni ploti iko na watu, you can't even imagine kunaweza kuwa na bar ndani because ni residential. It's utochu rooms unasema huwezi dhani ni bar. So one time this woman alikuwa amechoka sana msichana wake kuwa harassed, and then she's also is a survivor of sexual and gender based violence. So badala ya kupigana na uwe mtu akaamua kuingia kwa hiyo bar ndani. Okay, akaingia kwa hiyo bar akasema hakuna pombe inasaviwa hapa leo. Hii ni ploti. Okay? Vita kutokea, my two women were arrested. Okay? Because fight ilianza, walianza kufight hapo na manyana serve nini wakabebwa wakapelekwa kwa police station. Kupelekwa kwa police station, wamefika kwa police station napigiwa, Bina mama wako wameshikwa. Na find out shida ni nini, wameshikwa pamoja na wenye walikuwa na fight nao. Kidogo wenye na serve kwa hiyo bar wameachiliwa. Kumbe hiyo bar ni ya deputy OCPD. Una imagine huyo ni msimu mwenye hata chief anafaa kupeleka kesi kwake. Sasa yeye ndio akona, imagine ana own some of those bars kwa community. Na sasa hiyo ndio the highest level. Imagine umetoka kwa chief, that is the highest level and unaenda ku report. Sasa yeye ndio ana own. You get? But I want to encourage you, because also how you navigate most of these things, unaanza ku collect signatures za mama hata kama ni kwa full scap na kalamu wale wako na hiyo shida, because that is what we did. Tukaanza ku collect like signatures za mama na tukamapa, tukakuwa na information, tumeandika vizuri kwa full scap. Baka tumeandika hizo mabaa zote hii ploti, and then unajua I think in our law wanasemanga ufai kufungua bar 300 meter, inafaa kwa 300 meters away kutoka kwa shule. Unapata shule zingine, shule iko hapa, bar iko hapa. Mtu yeye ametoka shule, hiyo sana ametoka shule, cause wewe ni hustler, kabla ufike home ni saa 3 na ulikuwa umefunga mlango, cause you know how kids leave the door open. Umefunga mlango, so akitoka shule anaingia tu kwa bar, cause amecheza amechoka, ni saa 1, watoto wote wameenda kwa manyumba zao, ana mahali pa kwenda, ameingia kwa bar. Kidogo ameanza ulevi. Unajua, so tuna expose our sons and even our daughters, because you can imagine how much we hustle, you know, so you can't even leave your house open. That also came as an issue in the community. So we started mapping out, because collecting evidence, and I think that is one thing pia tunafaa kufunza wa mama, hata kama niyo sexual and gender based violence, usiblame wase sana ati awafanyi party yao. Are we also showing people how to collect and preserve data? Because unapata mtu akona like unaangalia mtoto amekuwa violated but unapata huyu mama hajui how do I collect and preserve data? What are the steps? What are the first steps to ensure that, oh, okay, if someone is violated, in fact, if someone is raped, oh, please don't shower, just go and report fast. Like how are we teaching people how to collect and preserve data as opposed to probably saying, or they don't show up, or they don't do this. Because at times you don't even know, even the stigma, you are so ashamed. So you do those little parts, because at times even those policemen you find, they're in cahoots with the chiefs. Because we've been in that situation where that case, before those women were arrested, to report kwa chief. Chief said, siezi guza iba na iba na iba. We didn't know why until they got to the court, until to the police station. Then we found out why the chief could not even touch those bars. You see, but when you start collecting ISO evidence and then the women tell their stories, when we took that to the deputy county commissioner, then kuna kwanga na hiyo namba inaitwangaji sijui fichua ama inaitwaji, you know those inasema there's a number actually that they have. Mulika, yeah, something mulika, it's just mulika or mulika mwizi, something of the sort. When you call, actually, they ensure that they cover you in terms of you become anonymous. But imagine if you have the evidence, and that is what we're teaching our women, how to collect and preserve data. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sexual and gender-based violence, whether it is crime, how do you collect and preserve that data? Ndo by the time when I present, you make it easier for wale watu wako juu kufanya kazi yao, kuchangamkia kazi yao, because now we took it to another level. So I think hiyo ni level moja. Una make sure mama unafanya nao kazi pia wana understand this story, right? But number 2, to Nelmo, right? I think I want to say why I even shared my story and where I am at right now, even saying I am not running in this current election, is because I am more effective at Badili Africa than actually running as a single individual. Because then at Badili, when we're working with Chama women who are entry points for politicians, we're able to say, what kind of leaders are you mobilizing for? We're able to say, there's this young man, there's this young woman, mchangamkieni. Mnaweza chukua pesa yao wazee, but changamkia huyu mse, huyu mtoto wetu. Mchangamkie mumsupport. Like that gives me more power than just me running as an individual. That is number 1. Number 2, even for our work in the university, trying to nurture leadership at that particular level, because those leaders at the university, those student leaders, are the ones who actually come and infiltrate national politics later on. So the quality of those leaders is very, very important. We're talking right now, currently, we have campaigns that are happening at the university level. Do you know, some of the candidates we are working with were telling us, to run for the student presidency, you need about 1 million. I'm just like, 1 million. 1 million to run for the student presidency. We have like 2 candidates from UON who are seeking 1 million. Like 1 million to run for the student presidency. So you can imagine, and they're not even making that much when they're elected. So you can imagine even where corruption begins from. Even the MOUs they are making with politicians. Because some of them have been elected in other campuses. There's this one who was telling us, I spent for 60 and I made a pact with this politician. When this politician has an issue, ama he's been arrested and he needs like goons na watu wakelele, na mtafutia students wanachangamka. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So from where I sit, the reason I'm not even vying is because I'm more effective from the other side. And what I can say, my last comment is, as young people, our currency is in our numbers, nothing else, because we say I wanna do. Like, at times you sit down with these senior politicians, they're like, bina, hamna pesa, and which is true. Mtu amekuwa accumulate mali kutoka times za Moi, uwezi shindana na yeye hata ukiiba, uwezi, because even the assets they have even in terms of land, umeenda kushindana kubai land uko Kamulu, akwota aneka. Ye zile prime lands zenye ako nazo, whether it is Karen, whether it is in Nanyuki, they cannot even compare to that little asset that you have. Our currency is in our numbers. And I kid you not, I can even ask a question in this room. If you have ever participated in the party primaries, nominations, inua mkono juu. Kama umeparticipate kwa nominations, not elections, not voting, inua mkono juu. Imagine, are you seeing there's no hand up? Yet, at the party primaries, that is where the election is won halfway. If you have the party ticket at the nomination, you're halfway in. And the nominations are won by a very small number. Like when I was running, mwenye alishinda sijui alishinda na 4-1. Like about 400 people, imagine, because people don't even show up for the nominations. Like I said, imagine no one has lifted his hand up here or her hand up here for party primaries. And that is where the elections are halfway won. But even young people, if you mobilize your friends, just 300, let me tell you, you have the party ticket. You have the party ticket. Our currency is in our numbers. That's it. Because most young people don't even have the resources. And that is where to start. And I want to affirm you actually running for office. But then even push you to make your peers and even people understand how they can support you better, online na offline. Hold even Adele here accountable. Adele, manze, push my agenda. Because there are people who follow Adele online in your community. Yeah, hold her accountable. Adele, I'm doing this. This is my agenda. I want to do this. Hold her accountable. Those people who are passive in the community, they actually moved from your community and are probably living in another area, could support you in more ways than one. People don't have to live in your community to actually support you. It doesn't have to be people in your community who actually fundraise for you. Like the people who supported me are not necessarily people who live in my community. Like segment people, like segment different people. It's the same way when we do our protest and we will say, well, like some guys don't come to the streets. Let me tell you, find out if this one cannot come to the streets and she's a lawyer, how can she still plug in? You know, because for me, my work allows me to be on the streets and no one will sack me because maybe I'm in the civil society and I'm at a position where I'm able to, you know, I'm running the organization. But in my previous employment, I could not participate in a protest even if I want to. But no one was able to tell me, even if you're not coming, Bina, you can buy us water. Because after tear gas, tunataka maji. So there's no plan. So it's either you're on the streets or you're not with us. But people want to participate. Even public participation, we blame people, which is true. And I know we also talk about public participation. But can we also accommodate new ways of engaging people? Such that if I'm not at the social hall where public participation is happening, how can we take care of tech? Because I can fill up, you know, like I can fill up my, you know, my feedback. I can give my feedback. Like even how can we make use of emails? How can we make use of online surveys so that we capture people who genuinely are not able to go to the social hall? I see those dates and I circulate those dates for public participation to my community. But saa zingine, even me, I'm not able to because I'm committed. But if I was able to do it on my phone, guess what? I would do it so quickly. But the fact that even the way they disseminate that information, a newspaper, how many young people are able to buy a newspaper in this country? Because that is where they disseminate that information. When was the last time you bought a newspaper? Who is in this room? I buy because of work, not because I want to, because of my work. But how many people actually genuinely buy a newspaper? That is where they disseminate information about public participation. How many women even buy a newspaper? So I think it's also challenge even the government institution. Why don't you digitize these announcements so that people know? At times they tell you about public participation and it's tomorrow, or it's next week, or it's 2 days. There's even no time to go through those documents. Those documents are heavy. Unonge about 40 million. Unataka nisome 40 million within 2 hours. Participation ni kesho, document, budget ni 1 billion ya Nairobi County. 1 billion. I've never even made 1 million. You want me to internalize 1 billion, imagine within one evening, and then I participate effectively the next day. I think we have to look at the systemic failures that make people in this country not participate effectively in these systems.
Thank you. Adele, can I make a request? And this is direct to Levi. So one of the things, I'm actually seated here and realizing, why are we having this conversation as the last session? Yeah, why are we having this session as the last session? We are saying survivor support. We should lead by example by ensuring they are on top of the list. So moving forward, anyone who wants to engage by supporting survivors of sexual violence, they should put their agenda #1. Because then that group or conversation will actually lead the rest of the conversations but also for the safety and security of the women around the room.
Yeah.
So for me, it's important because I'm asking myself so many questions. Anenda Korogocho, Anenda Kawangware. I have my team here, then I'm starting to think, how many taxes are we going to take? Because that goes back to, we are trying to we are making women vulnerable to violence. So who are they going to meet when they're going back home? Kasarani guys, wako wapi, wanakunywa. So let's look at, when we plan for events, let's look at logistics from beginning to end. And I'm happy to do that, to make sure that people are safe going back home.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wangu. That's a really important point. And I think that's the importance of like having an open space, is to be able to be honest with your feedback and say, hey, going forward, how can we do ABCD differently? And because of that, I think it's time for us to wrap it up. But I think we have such phenomenal women on the panel today who have raised so many pertinent issues and have, even my mind is like bubbling with, okay, we need to do this. So could we kindly just appreciate them with a warm round of applause, because they're phenomenal and they're on the front line in their different industries doing such important work, and we're very thankful for everything that you do. So I'm going to hand over back to Levi now.
Sure, thanks everyone. Wangu, that's a very good point. And one thing that I'd really like is to be able to have this conversation honestly every year, if not, more often. So I want to thank, but before I thank everyone, I also want to recognize the people who have, we have our sign language translator who's been in the corner for the whole time, and she's been, oh, there she is. And also our people outside. Sorry, do you mind just coming in for just 1 minute, please? Just 1 minute. It's not a trap, it's really. We just want to thank you for staying this long to help, seriously. Yeah, you, please. And also the crew behind there, seriously, there's so many people who have put this together, and we've gone over time, so I just want to thank everyone, please. And the last thing I'll just say is, let's use this space to talk to each other, right? We're all here because we care. And I know Bina, I know many people mentioned the media costs money. Yes, they do. We actually invited many people here, but they're either at Kasarani or, they're costing. But at the same time, there was Anjeri Rugene, there was a Faith. So the people here, talk to them, exchange numbers, and use them to better the situation. That's what I would say. And I'm really humbled to know all of you, honestly. You're really amazing people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we need to appreciate ourselves, all of us, because clearly we're doing something, all of us.
Yeah. I think the last thing is just to thank Levi. I think he really is an ally in this fight. And this is our first time meeting each other face to face, but just the work he does, even pushing for this to happen, is really important. So thank you.